What up, my friends, and welcome back to Fox 5's Live Zone. It is about time that we bring in an individual that is near and dear to our hearts, not only here at Fox 5, but to everyone in the DMV community. I'm talking about Commanders superfan Tailgate Ted, who is joining us right now. Ted, thank you so very much for taking a moment with us here today, bro.
I appreciate you having me on, Chad. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Ted. You know, I kind of got to think about this here. I feel as though you are so much more than just a Commanders super fan at this point. I mean, you go to the drafts, you attend combines, you go to practices. You're basically an analyst for the team.
Well, you know, I'd like to give them feedback and, give them some advice when they're looking for it and even when they're not. And also want to make sure that the fans can kind of get a feeling of how we see things are from, the outside looking in.
That's right. You're more so a representative of the people as opposed to just a super fan. And I think that's a great place for us to get started, right? Like you and I, we have not had a conversation since right before the draft was. Both of us had a feeling that Jayden Daniels would be picked. Of course, he was, and he's made an impressive splash on the DMV community thus far. What I want to know from you, though, is if we take 5 out of the equation of this rookie class, who do you feel as though needs to play well or play at all this season in order for this team to move forward?
I'd have to say San Still. The secondary was an issue last year. And for them to be able to get Mike, I mean, everyone's talking about how it was just a huge acquisition by this team in the draft. And to bring his talent here, I feel can really bolster a secondary that needs some help.
And especially when you're looking at a young man such as himself who can be multiple, he can play different positions out there. I mean, any defensive coordinator is looking for that, especially in today's time, to be able to really fill those holes.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And it's going to be interesting to see what they can do with him out there, considering some of the holes that we have in that lineup. And from a defensive lines perspective, it's nice to have that complement, to have the back end play as well as the front end's doing also.
I got my eye every time that I'm out at practice and I'm attempting to watch everyone. I can't help but for McCaffrey to catch my eye. I mean, when you look at McCaffrey out there, he's got quick twitch. He gets off of the line quickly. He's impressive in drills. He's impressive when he's running routes. I think that there will be a place for him in the offense this year. I think that he's going to unseat someone potentially in that wide receiver 3 spot this year. What have you seen from him or even heard about him?
So I haven't had a chance to actually get out there and see anything because they've had a lot of the OTAs and mini camps not being able to be attended by fans. But from what I'm hearing and from you and the other people out there, that he's the real deal. I mean, he is out there at 5:45 in the morning with Jayden, one of the first people out there. He's putting in the work. He has the intangibles and he has the pedigree just with that last name. And only one ball can go around. So I am curious to see how he's going to mix in with an Austin Eckler, with a Jahan, with a Terry, with a Brian Robinson. But he definitely has a ton of upside. And I love to see if they could actually use his just intangibles that we really haven't had at that position for quite some time.
All right, so now I got to get to the real nitty-gritty of what's going on out here. Maybe not on the football field, maybe not even in real life, but at least in social media and in all of the podcasts. We're talking about Brandon Ayuk, the current wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers. He's in some talks with them trying to renegotiate his contract, but it has come up multiple times, as recently as last week on The Pivot, in which he said out of his mouth that if it doesn't work out for him in San Francisco, he would like to be traded right here to Washington, D.C. to join his former teammate and quarterback in number 5 there. What are your thoughts on Ayuk and Daniels teaming up here in D.C.?
Jayden's not going to be happy with me saying this, but Ayuk's a great player. But can he play left tackle? Can he play offensive line?
Wow.
We are not one player away. If we were one player away, then I'd say, okay, yes, then let's think about this. But realistically, like earlier before, there's only one football. Ayuk is also looking to get paid.
Big pay.
Terry is also going to be almost a $24 million cap hit next year at wide receiver. Can you afford to pay Terry and Ayuk next year close to $50 million just at one position? I don't think so. We have a lot more pieces that need to be built around this team. And I think we're kind of in a fantasy football mentality. Everyone likes points. Everyone likes stats. And Ayuk puts those up. But realistically, there's other pieces of this team that need to be put in place. And I don't think Ayuk is one of them.
And I think that you make a great point there, especially when you speak about the idea of fantasy football. I mean, you put these two big-time wide receivers out there on the outside, but when they eat up that much cap space, who is down there on the interior that's allowing for all of this to move and allowing for that to go? But just kind of taking that point and going a step further, and again, these two young men, they played college football together, so they are friends. But as far as that locker room goes, Ted, do you believe that with Daniels being with Ayuk while he's making these statements, we saw the phone call on TikTok, do you worry at all that that bleeds over into the locker room like, yo, Jaden wants for Brandon to come here. We already got 3 or 4 wide receivers.
I don't. I mean, when you see these guys after a game, they're exchanging jerseys with guys that they were just literally running into nonstop for 60 minutes because they're friends. There's something that transcends that locker room. And the guys on this team will understand that. Those guys are good friends, have been, and I don't really think anyone's going to think anything about it. It's also part of a business and part of negotiations for Ayuk. And good for him for being able to try and leverage this relationship and get his Q rating up there until he, removes all 49ers mentions from his social media. I'm not sure if he's at that goal line part yet, but until then, it's just talk and smoke and mirrors for me.
And again, according to the Pivot podcast, in which Brandon Ayuk was a guest on that show, he said that he and his representation had one more meeting lined up with the San Francisco 49ers. If that didn't go the way that they were looking for it to go, then they would begin to explore all other trade options. The Commanders not the only team on that list, but he did mention them multiple times. Okay, so we got camp coming up here later on this month. This is when the football starts to be played for real out here, Ted. This team, this organization, this entire region seems to be moving in the right direction. What are you looking to find out once camp starts between then and the actual preseason games?
I want to see this Cliff Kingsbury offense, and I want to really see what this offensive line can do. You've got 3 new guys coming up on that offensive line, and I want to see, can Brandon Coleman actually play tackle? A lot of people talked about him being somewhat a little bit too small, but coming out of the draft, out of the combine, he had just amazing numbers, very athletic. His RAS score, I want to think, was around 9.97. I think it's 5th highest for all the linemen that were in the draft. Can he potentially be that left tackle that really everyone on the Commanders thinks he can be, but everyone from the outside does not believe he can play? No offense to Cornelius Lucas. He has been a journeyman tackle, hasn't really just solidified that he can play that position full time. Can Coleman actually take that spot and run with it?
Is that the most important position on this team? Is that the biggest question mark for this team headed into not only camp, but potentially then the regular season? Is it that offensive line?
To me, yes, it's the offensive line. I mean, we all know that Jaden can run, but there's also people concerned about his frame. We all know that Sam Howell got beat up last year and was about to break the record for being sacked the most in the NFL. The last thing we need is Jaden to take those kind of hits. So the Commanders did what they needed to by bringing in Biotis and some other guys to try and hopefully fill some of those gaps from just that porous offensive line last year. But are they going to gel? Can they gel? OTA's minicamp, it's just a passing camp. The guys haven't had pads on. We can't see what they can really do. We'll get a chance to actually see that in training camp. And more importantly, in some of these joint practices that they've set up with some of these other teams.
Tailgate Ted, thank you so very much, brother, for stopping by and dropping dimes like you always do. More than a super fan, a true representative of the people. We appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate you having me on, Chad. Take care. Have a happy 4th.
All right, and Commanders Camp, as we talked about, coming up later on this month. Fox 5 will be sure to be out there checking it out and bringing you all of the information from Commanders Park. On behalf of Tailgate Ted, we'll be right back in the Live Zone.